Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, that's G-R-A-N, group, at edinarealty.com, or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners.
On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 4-game series against the Tampa Bay Rays. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. The Twins head south to Florida, taking 2 of 4 from the Rays, arguably a series in which they needed to take 3. But before we get into that, Dan, a quick note. Now, folks, I don't know if you're visual learners or perhaps, you're more of somebody who likes to read and soak in the information, but Dan and I are getting ready for this show, and I told him, hey, I want to get a picture of the current MLB playoff bracket. And he goes, well, you have the standings there. Can't you just figure it out? And I said, well, yeah, but I like to have the picture. It's nice, it's clean, it's easy to read. I'm getting tossed, folks, before the episode even begins, because Dan's mocking me for not being able to visualize just perfect the standings in the bracket that I could have so easily searched to find.
I know, but I'm just saying, the NFL had this structure for decades, right? That the first and the second teams get a bye, the 3 plays the 6, the 4 plays the 5. You literally have the whole standings listed out in that way. I don't even have to go from division to division. I can just see the 3 leaders and the 3 wild cards. This isn't that hard.
It's not that hard. That's not the point, Dan. I'm saying that if I went to somebody on the street, a casual MLB fan, and I showed him the standings or the postseason bracket, and I said, which of these is easier to understand and more pleasing to look at if you're trying to sort out who plays who in the postseason? No one is picking the standings, Dan.
No, but there's so much more information in the standings, the records and how far back teams are, and you can do so much more with the information. It's not just a snapshot.
Both, Dan. They're both there. It's just when I'm making a chart at work, depending who I'm presenting to, right? I give the depth of information for which the meeting calls. In this meeting, we have both sets of data, Dan. We don't have to choose one or the other.
I know, but I gotta scroll. I gotta use the mouse pad here, the trackpad, whatever it's called. I don't know what these things are. Anyway,
okay. So your argument is it's more lazy for me to add another screenshot to the spreadsheet than you saying I don't want to scroll? That's the argument we're having right now?
Work? No. I'm saying you're adding unnecessary work that you could do in your head. You're very good with numbers, right? It can't be that hard for you to look at the standings and put the bracket together mentally.
I think you're so in the wrong here. It's not even worth discussing any further, Dan.
All right.
This is way easier. It's better. It's better for the show. It's better since the dawn of time, Dan. People would agree that looking at the bracket is better when you're trying to get a quick look at what the postseason would look like if it happened today.
I will agree with you that it's nice to have the National League there too, because you don't have that in there. So I'll grant you that. But anyway,
the concession you just made, it's pointless. There's no even reason to make that concession, Dan.
Anyway, so the Twins split in Tampa. You're disappointed with this. I feel okay. I told you after game 2, if they split the last 2, I'm all right, because nobody else wants to win a wild card slot. So I say lose them all to win. Well, I don't say that actually, but lose them every now and then. Rocco doesn't have to change his strategy because Seattle, Boston, and Detroit don't want it.
No, they keep losing, Dan, and I'm quite frustrated. My Detroit Tigers, the team that could win me a ticket to the Essenspiel Festival in Germany, is now 5.5 back from the wild card spots. It just makes my heart so sad, Dan. I'm starting to lose the faith.
All right, well, I think we should go ahead and start talking about this series here in the recap.
Series recap.
Game 1, Dan, this one was closer than it should have been. And honestly, that's the way all of these games felt. But Twins come away with this one, thank goodness, 5-4. Top of the first, Twins get a run on a first pitch 2-out RBI double by Royce Lewis. I don't know if you saw the quote by Lewis where he said he was frustrated that people were complaining that he wasn't hitting home runs. And so he was hitting singles and doubles. He's like, do those not matter?
I don't like that kind of chatter. It's like putting a chip on your own shoulder. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. No, but the Rays answer almost immediately in the bottom of the first with a 2-out, 2-run single by Dylan Carlson. So it's 2-1 Rays. The big hit, though, almost arguably of the whole series, is right after that. The top of the second, Twins get a couple guys on, and then Larnach lines a 3-run home run to right field, hits a human being really hard with this baseball. He ends up apologizing, gifting a signed bat. None of that is visible. And then some funny camera work happened, David. So suddenly, in the bottom of the second, only one camera is working, and it's the one from center field where the guy clearly has a rhythm. You know, like he does kind of one thing, right? He zooms in on the batter, and then he like tracks the batter. And it was really bizarre because that's all we got, like, for everything. And Corey Provis did a great job, right? He went back to radio mode, like, this is his place. But it was like 2 innings where we basically had to gauge how the play went by Corey Provis's voice and the reaction of the batter from the batter's box to first base. It was really funny.
It does speak to his talent a bit, how quickly he can make that switch, though, and like understanding and realizing the situation and being like, okay, I know how to do this. I'm basically the best ever at it.
You underestimate my power.
But it was funny because then in the bottom of the third, Junior Caminero doubled to left center to score a run, but I didn't know where it went, right? It was just there, and suddenly it was 4-3. We just had to trust Corey. And then SWR gets into the fourth, but not out of it. Alcala comes in, gets the last out. We're going to talk about kind of his role now in the bullpen a little bit later. He does strand a runner on base, so that was good. SWR finishes with 3 2/3 innings pitched, 6 hits, 3 earned runs, 2 walks, 2 Ks, 71 pitches, but not a lot of quality to the pitches, not a lot of movements. That's what they were talking about in the TV cast. But he escapes nonetheless, and the bullpen is great.
Yeah, Henriquez, Jax, Sands, and Duran follow Alcala, and they allow just 1 run. And then the bottom of the 7th, Dan, Eddy Julien makes a ridiculously poor throw to first on a hard hit ball by Josh Lowe. And so I'm watching this live. I'm having a draft at my house, and we're outside, right? So I have 2 TVs on. I have the Boston, Florida State game, and I have the Twins game on the big TV. It's a beautiful night, worked out great. But I'm watching, like, everybody's kind of focused on their draft, right? But I say, hey, guys, can we just pause for a minute? I need to show you just what excellence at second base looks like on the replay. And everybody sees him make this diving stop, and they're like, oh, man, that's pretty good. And then he throws it just 30 feet north of first base, Dan.
Oh, Canada.
He was trying to throw to his homeland all the way from Florida, right? That's a really long throw. Luckily, Brooks Lee, his eventual replacement on the roster next year, homers as a righty for the first time in the majors to make it 5-3 in the 8th, and the Twins needed that run because Johnny DeLuca homered off Sands in the bottom of the 8th. It was 5-4, but Duran, who was really good in this series, pitches a 1-2-3 9th on 14 pitches for his 21st save, and the Twins get the win, 5-4.
If Duran comes in the 9th, all is well. If he comes in at any other point, Dan, where the Twins aren't leading, you don't want him on the mound for whatever reason. But game 2, Twins lose this one 2-1. Festa pitches really well, except for a couple of things that I would argue just didn't bounce his way. But he goes 5 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. Top of the second, Twins get on the board with the Carlos Santana solo shot, so they're up 1-0. That's all the scoring the Twins can do. And then I don't even know, Dan, that I can muster the strength at this occasion to talk more about this game.
Well, we'll save the bottom of the 4th when the Rays get their runs, and we'll save the top of the 9th when the Twins didn't get any more runs. Austin Martin cost them, more runs with terrible routes. You're going to talk about that later. Also, again, there was a technology issue here, putting Corey Provis into radio mode. There's all kinds of problems. Do they have just senior citizens running the technology down at Tropicana Field? Like, what is going on down there?
That is ageism, Dan Thompson. Thank you very much.
Sure, I should.
And I'll say, Dan, I've sat in a few different places at Target Field where the cameramen are very close to the seats. Yeah, not always the youngest guys in those positions, Dan. I do think that there's like a tenure, right? Like, you don't get to start on the cameras. What are you thinking?
Run away! Run away! Run away!
Yeah, I shouldn't talk anymore about those things. Now, you mentioned how David Festa pitched well, but just the plays were not made behind him. I think I'd make the same argument for Game 3 for Louie Varland. So the Rays win this one 9-4. Why are you making that sound?
I don't think, well, he was in a much worse situation than he got himself into before the bad plays were made. I would argue that Festa got into a bad situation because of the plays not being made behind him. Louie Varland was in a bad place, and then the defense failed behind him.
Well, I just so disagree. So, okay, anyway, so Royce Lewis makes his first start in the majors at second base. Team guy, right? Because, clearly he doesn't want to play second base, and he's already been moved around a couple times by this organization. He's played center, he's played short, he's played third, now he's playing second. But Louie Varland comes in after Ronnie Henriquez does that little soft start. What do they call that? The opener, right? The
opener.
Yes.
Yeah,
thank you. So Louie Varland, he only goes 2 1/3, 8 hits, 8 earned runs, 1 walk, 1 strikeout. Okay. So bottom of the fourth, the Rays score first because Varland was greedy, right? He was trying to pick off Caminero with runners at the corners and 1 out. Next pitch is a grounder to shortstop. Lee struggles to get a grip, throws high to Vazquez. Caminero is safe at home, so it's 2-0 Rays, and there's lots. And I can't help but think that speed has caused all of these problems here, and not necessarily Louie Varland himself. But then things just get away from him even more.
Bottom of the fourth continues, unfortunately, for Louie Varland. More runs for the Rays. Dylan Carlson with a single on a bunt. Joe Calavaro singles, and then there's runners again at the corners. Infield in, which is just a trend, Dan. Rocco, if he had his way, Dan, the infield would just always play in. They would never be back. It would just always be in. Rortvedt reaches on a fielder's choice to Royce, who is credited with a throwing error on the throw home, and then Taylor Walls, a 2-run single. Rays are up 6-0, and then Yandy Diaz gets up, 2-run homer. Rays up 8-0. Good night, Twins. What a terrible baseball game.
Okay, but then Louie Varland said some things that I couldn't make out. Like, I couldn't read his lips on the TV broadcast, but he was mad, and I don't blame him. Everybody behind him made terrible plays. This was not on Louie, right? They should have had 2 outs at home that they didn't make because Vazquez couldn't catch. I think even a good catcher, a good defensive catcher, or a defensive catcher who's on his game, I don't know which way to categorize Vazquez right now, should have gotten both of those guys at home, and instead the innings continue and spiral and snowball for Louie Varland.
Couple of notes here, Dan. 8 earned runs. You know what earned runs are, right? Just to make
do,
sure
but that was because they were dumbs, or they were incomplete plays that could have been made by better defensive players.
Secondly, I think Vazquez needs another trip to Grand Slam. I mean, that guy has got to figure it out. Whatever he did before, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, go back up to that place, man. I do not understand. It's like a switch gets flipped where he just is no longer good at baseball, or he's good at baseball. But it's not even streaky, Dan. I don't even know how to explain this.
Wax on, wax off.
Well, the Twins do get on the board in the top of the 7th. Kyle Farmer hits a solo home run. Trevor Larnach doubles. Santana hits a 2-run home run. Michael Hellman, who made his debut in this series, he hits a double. Wallner singles, and so it's 8-4, but nothing more. The Rays add another run in the bottom of the 8th, and so we get that final 9-4, and the Twins enter Game 4 desperate, I think, for a win.
This was a very important game for the Twins to win, and thank goodness they escaped by the skin of their teeth. They win this one 4-3. Lopez is on it, 6 2/3, 3 earned runs, 1 walk, 9 strikeouts. Top of the first, I thought this was interesting. Lewis strikes out on a pitch clock violation, and he's not happy about it, but it's pretty obvious that it was a pitch clock violation. And you know who else, Dan, got credited with a strike due to a pitch clock violation? Your guy, Byron Buxton, on his rehab stint, gets tossed from a minor league game, Dan, that he's supposed to be rehabbing. This game doesn't matter to Byron Buxton. He starts barking at the umpire because he asked for time. He thought the ump gave it to him. It seems that the ump didn't give it to him, and he starts the clock. It's this whole thing. And what I'll say in defense of Buxton here, outside of the fact that he definitely should have just let this go, he just kept at him. He just kept doing it. It's like with me and my wife, where I just can't let something go, and I keep bringing it up, and I know it's dumb. I know it's so dumb. It's not the gracious thing to do. It's not the husband I want to be, and yet I'm still like, you put that bag in front of the sink again, and it's like, who is that helping, Dan Thompson?
Look at that. We got parenting advice last episode. Now we got marriage advice this episode. We're all over the place. No, I think you're right. But it also seemed to stem from the fact that his hip was bothering him, and so I think he was probably bothered by the bothering hip, and that it kind of came out on the ump because he's not going to join them in Kansas City is what the Twins are saying. They're going to kind of have to reevaluate. We're going to talk more about Buxton a little bit later, but as this game continues here, the Twins do get on the board first in the top of the 2nd, which we'll talk about more as well. But Eddy Julien hits a 3-run home run. It's his first home run for the Twins since April 25th, and yet it's still his 8th of the season. Like, I think it just speaks to how good he was all the way back in April, and then the Twins get another one in the top of the 3rd on a Matt Wallner solo home run, but it was only 357 feet, and I don't really know if that counts for Matt Wallner.
Are we sure? Maybe he's not feeling well. I mean, that would be the most realistic rationale here. But bottom of the 3rd, Lopez gets into trouble. Johnny DeLuca and Taylor Walls single. Then the Twins pick up 2 quick outs. Then Pablo walks Brendan Lau to load the bases. Junior Caminero scores 2 on an RBI single, and now the Twins are still up 4-2.
Well, and then it's a quiet 4th and 5th and 6th, and then there's some weirdness in the bottom of the 7th.
Yeah, Johnny DeLuca doubles. Then the Twins get 2 quick outs. And then Yandy Diaz hits a ball to Wallner in right field, and it's on the ground. And after Wallner fields it, he's running, like sprinting to his left, and he crashes into the wall and flips over it. And Dan, it looked like a cartoon. So he flips over the wall, and then he jumps back over, and he throws it into the field of play. At this point, Diaz has advanced to third, and the run has scored. But then, Dan, all sorts of confusion is abounding in the stadium, Dan.
I knew exactly what to do, but in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do.
The umpires get together, Dan, and I don't even know if the first 5 minutes they even knew what they were talking about. Like, they weren't even sure what the issue was that they were discussing. And then it goes to New York, and again, that great audio technical prowess of the Tampa Bay Rays clearly at work here. They show us the room in New York where this is happening for a super long time, Dan. Like, after a while, I thought this was a documentary about the inside workings of the MLB studios in New York. I'm like, what? Are the Twins still on? Is there a weather delay? What are we looking at right now?
Oh, that's funny. Well, what happened in the end? You got to tell people what happened after that.
Oh, I'm sorry. All of this was to determine what base Diaz should be at. And this is very similar to the play we had last series where the first baseman for the Blue Jays got tied up in the netting and he couldn't get out. And so there was a dead ball. And so Austin Martin tried to score even though a guy is all wrapped up in the net like a fish. This is a very similar instance where they say, nope, Wallner went over the wall, dead ball. He has to be at second. I didn't catch the whole explanation because I have to think there's more to it than that. Because otherwise, wouldn't you just have guys if there's a low wall? Like if you think it's going to be a double and you feel the single, you just run as quickly as you can and dive out of bounds.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would do. Well, another debut for the Twins here. By the way, it's Deshaun Kersey Jr., who we have been calling to see all year. That poor guy, he's like the 32nd ranked prospect in the Twins organization. Like, no respect for Deshaun Kersey.
Well, he's also 32, which doesn't help. He's not that old, but he's not young.
I'm not dead.
No, but he's anyway. So, but he almost makes a great catch, but instead the ball bounces off the wall, which leads to a Christopher Morel triple. But Jax comes in, strikes out Dylan Carlson to finish the inning, and then Duran another clean ninth with some beautiful pitching, I would say, out of Johan Duran.
It's nice to feel confident with him on the mound again, especially in those circumstances.
Especially when you have no faith in almost any other Twins reliever right now to hold a lead.
Well, Jax.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and maybe Cole Sands. Well, we're going to get to that. Let's keep going here to Puckett's Picks winner.
Touch 'em all, Kirby Puckett.
Puckett's Picks winner.
Had to do a little math on this one, Dan. We had to get to the second layer of tie breaks here.
Yeah, so you end up winning with Brooks Lee, actually, with 5 points. I had Larnach with 5 points as well, and they each had 1 home run, but Lee only had 3 strikeouts. Larnach had only 3 strikeouts until Game 4, and then he added 3 more and sabotaged me. So you get the win. Hoax took Miranda. Lewis was the pick for the listeners. They each had 3, and so, David, you get a little bit closer to securing the season title.
Yeah, it's going to be rough for Hoax to catch me now. I have 22.5. Hoax is at 16. The listeners at 10. And Dan, you're at 8. And for your sake, I hope you hit double digits, Dan, because this is
I
rough,
don't need your pity. It's okay. I will deal with it. We got 4 options now instead of 3. Well, and then Carlos Santana was the team high. We have more to say about him in the Beast versus Bench.
Beast versus Bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
Hard to pick a position player because so many of them weren't good at one thing. And I know that 4 games sometimes kind of extends the sample size, obviously. But Carlos Santana is my pick. He had hits in the last 3 games, including a couple home runs, a nice tag for the final out, and not letting Game 4 get interesting. A steady, solid guy at first base once again. Again, he wasn't perfect, but he was the best of the options, I thought, from position players.
I think that that's the correct pick from a position player side. I'm actually going to go on the pitching side of things. I got to give it to Pablo Lopez because, honestly, the Twins need him to be this guy in order to make the postseason, or at least in order to make the postseason and not seem like we are just barely hanging on. Like, even if they can just win every Pablo start and maybe, 80% of the remaining 5 or 6 starts for Bailey Ober, I think that I will just feel much better about this team heading into the postseason, hoping that Buxton and Correa get back.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that after a bit here. As for the bench, I went with Vazquez. He was 0 for 8. I thought that he was, as I alluded to, part of the problem with Louie Varland's appearance in Game 3. Didn't look good. We also kind of had questions about him pinch hitting earlier in the series as well. He's just not on, and that was a problem in this series.
I'm telling you, man, one quick trip to Triple Play, get it done, score some tickets, figure out what you need to figure out, and then return to the team. I got to give it to Willie Castro. 1 for 14, Dan. 6 strikeouts, but this is the one that was sort of the dagger here. 9 men left on base. And honestly, he's really fallen off as of late. Playing in the outfield doesn't help him because he's not as efficient as an outfielder as he is an infielder. And I feel a little bad about this because probably 8 episodes ago, a buddy said, you should really talk about how Willie Castro has been the MVP of this team, filling in all over the field and coming in the clutch. And I keep telling him, okay, I'm going to bring that up on the next show, as soon as Castro has a good good series. And I've been saying that, Dan, for a lot of episodes now, and we have yet to bring it up.
Yeah, I think I was looking back at Puckett's picks. In the last 12 series, he's only been picked once, which I think is just kind of it's a sense of how we feel about him. We don't see him as one of the top 4 players right now for the Twins.
Rocco's Rewind.
Well, so I'm going to start with just a quick thing about the bullpen. I think it's good that Sands and Alcala have kind of swapped roles here. Sands has earned, I think, the opportunity to be a late guy, and so I'm glad to see that. I just also, though, wonder, like, when do you have to say, and I get that he's not the one making this choice, but, like, when do you have to bring back Correa and Buxton? Is it a date thing? Is it a how big does the wild card lead sit? Like, what do you think? When do you just have to say, guys, we just need you back?
Yeah, I think if it looks like they're going to make the postseason without him, they don't come back until that first series, and maybe not even then. I think that at this point, I'm not really.
You don't think they might come back at all?
I don't think that they're going to come back during the regular season at this point. No.
Really? Oh, wow.
Well, I mean, they have a month left. There's been no timetable for Correa's return, and Buxton played 3 innings, got tossed, and then said he was still feeling broken. I mean, to me, that doesn't point to, oh yeah, they're right on the cusp of returning.
Well, no, but like, don't you want to get him a little bit more warmed up and ready for the post? Like, do you bring him back for that Orioles series at least at the end?
I think that especially with Correa, I honestly let him sit with his feet up until the postseason, and he'll do what he did last season, where he all of a sudden just turns it on and he's ready to rock. I don't care if he's, ran or swung the bat or hit off the tee. Just put him in his uniform, strap up his ankle real good and real tight, and, make sure the planters, I don't even know where the plantar fasciitis is, Dan. I know that you've looked at all of the different medical journals about
Come on.
I don't believe that man's ever been to medical school.
Put him up there, let him swing away in the postseason as the DH, and I think that's going to be the way that we're going to see him in the most capable fashion, Dan.
Man, you're so negative. I do think that they are going to bring them back at some point before, just to kind of see what they've got to get them back in the rhythm, because you don't want the first game back to be a playoff game that is almost it's almost by definition a must win.
Well, to give a little piece of anecdotal evidence here, Dan, I don't play golf all that often anymore, but I get to play, maybe a couple of times a year, and the first time I go out, Dan, is always the best. So, maybe there's something to be said for Correa and Buxton holding off until the postseason.
All right, what's your thing for Rocco?
So game 2, top 9, pinching Vazquez for Larnach, which, okay, first of all, Clevinger's coming in. He's a lefty with traditional splits. Vazquez is batting, Dan, against lefties, .198. Now, Larnach has far fewer at-bats because Rocco never lets him hit against lefties. He's batting .222. So I just think, why on earth in that moment are you switching spots? Like, again, maybe Vazquez, who was really hot 2.5 weeks ago, sure, maybe you let him take a shot at it. But in this moment, I do not understand why you're not letting Larnach, who's arguably one of your hottest hitters right now, have his opportunity to win the ball game. Right,
he'd hit a home run the game before. By the way, the Twins had gotten the first 2 guys on, so all they needed was to get a run. Brooks Lee struck out.
Yes.
And, it's hard to argue with that. I would say the smell test says leave Larnach in, and, maybe you need Vazquez later as a defensive sub or something like that.
I don't know that we need to talk about personal hygiene, Dan. I mean, I guess I've never smelled either of these players.
The eye test, the smell test, whatever it might be.
But 2 other quick notes for Rocco. Why on earth didn't you switch spots in these games you're losing? Did you not see how well it worked last series? And then secondly, now that we've seen Kershey Jr. at center field, play him there every game. I don't care if he goes 0 for 1,000. He's the best option. He's not going to cost you runs in center. He's probably going to save you a couple. And honestly, he's going to swing the bat, and if he makes contact, great. And if he doesn't, you still know you're in competent hands in center field.
All right, well, let's move forward here to the Minnesota moment.
Minnesota moment.
I got to go game 2, Dan, bottom 4. And this is when Festa's on the mound. I'm really annoyed. Austin Martin misreads a Jonathan Arando single that allows a run to score, and then it leads to another. And this likely forces Festa to only go 5 when he could have gone 6. And you've said this a couple of different times in episodes now, Dan, where you've said, how many times have we heard Provis or the color guy say, well, he kind of got a late break on that one. It's every ball, Dan. Like Austin Martin at night, he sits down and he says, I hope tomorrow balls are hit directly at me. I hope tomorrow balls are hit directly at me. Because he would hate to have to read the ball, Dan, and figure out where he should be.
Yeah, or just at Matt Wallner. Or like let somebody else catch it.
And then every time before the game, he's like putting a map, in his back pocket. People think he's like looking at how to set up for players. No. It's just a map for good luck, Dan.
Is that what you have too? So you can kind of tell like where the Twins are traveling the next series?
Dan, I
north,
desperately
south,
need a map.
east, west, right?
Thank you. I mean, without time zones, Dan, I would be in a lot of trouble, let me tell you.
My moment is game 4, the top of the second. Eddy Julien's home run that we talked about earlier couldn't have been better timed in so many ways, right? Timed for him, because it's clear he's going to be on the roster here for a little while, at least, even if he's not on the playoff roster. But also how badly the Twins needed to just take a lead here and hand it to their ace. I felt really good after I saw that, after I saw that hit. I think they're going to win this game. And hopefully then they just have to stay afloat here. They have to go 500 basically the rest of the way. And even then, the teams behind them have been so bad.
Were you expecting this? Or did you even hope that he was going to hit a homer there? You know what I mean? Sometimes a guy gets up and you're sort of feeling okay, this is a good spot. If he gets in a good count, I bet you he's going to swing away. I wasn't oh yeah, Eddy Julien's definitely going to smack one here. I'm thinking, please don't hit into a double play. That's what I'm thinking.
I mean, it was middle, right? So,
yeah.
If Eddy Julien can hit anything right now, it's got to be that.
Do you know who threw a lot of middle pitches, Dan?
I don't.
Yeah, well, let's talk about him in this next segment.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Mauer's Musings.
Is that a cheap shot at Louie Varland?
It's not a cheap shot. It's the truth, Dan. I'm not even going out of my way to make that point.
Isn't he from Minnesota?
I do love Minnesota, and I cheer for Minnesota teams, and I really don't want to leave this state, maybe in the future because of employment and things I may have to. But my goodness, Dan, the whole, you're from the same state as me, so we have to stick together. I know a lot of people at Minnesota, Dan, that I don't really care for, It's just one of those things where I understand that Louie Varland is from Minnesota. That doesn't mean that he's automatically a good baseball player. Have you met Caleb Thielbar?
Oh, boo. Come on. I got to play it again. I tell you, you can't keep taking these cheap shots at our guys. Well,
if they're bad at baseball, what do you explain? I'm not taking shots at Joe Mauer right now. I'm taking shots at guys on the roster who aren't playing well.
It feels like you are. It feels like you are.
We have a whole segment about guys we put on the bench, Dan. You didn't say, oh, poor Willie Castro, David put him on the bench. No, and I can't say that Louie Varland threw a lot of terrible pitches. All of a sudden, because he's from Minnesota, he's above criticism.
All right, so, okay. Well, I know the answer now, I guess, to my question. Why isn't Louie Varland already in the bullpen for this team? And it's kind of philosophical because there's a lot of angles, so you go ahead and go first.
Wait, why isn't... Well, hang on. First
why
of all, I would
isn't
argue
he in the bullpen
this
right
is
now?
This is a cheaper shot than any that I have taken, Dan.
No,
You're
it's not
saying
a cheap shot.
You're not good...
I'm asking about usage. I'm not so much he can pitch, right? He had 2 wonderful innings before the one that his defense failed him during.
Okay. We're not... My goodness, Dan.
There he is, beating that dead horse.
No, that's not what happened at all. No, I agree that he would be better off in the bullpen, but I got to be honest, Dan, that man lets a whole bunch of fly balls go real deep at target field. So I don't know. Hopefully, when he is in the bullpen, he can have a little bit better control and he's outside of the zone as opposed to middle. Even though he can throw it real fast, you still got to be able to place those pitches, Dan. So I don't know why he's not in the bullpen right now, but honestly, I don't think Rocco's not considering it as an option. I think it's really difficult though when a guy is really set on being a starter. It's one of those things, Dan, where sooner or later Louie Varland's got to look himself in the mirror and understand that if you want to make it in the MLB and not be a journeyman at AAA, you're going to have to make some hard choices.
Maybe just show him a picture of Randy Dobnak and just have him stare at that for a little while.
You too could have a beard like this.
All right, what's your question?
Actually, I'm sure he can't grow a beard. Have you seen that guy's face?
He's too little.
He's
too young. Yeah, anyway.
I don't even know. What am I talking about? Okay, hang on. You got me so frazzled here, Dan. I just can't. Okay, so my dad, Dan, I'm not sure how frequently he listens, but every now and again, I'll get a text. And he's a Twins fan. He doesn't get to watch as many games as he'd like. He's a really busy guy. He sends a text and he says, are you guys going to talk about the Twins tanking to be sure that they don't have to play the Yankees in the postseason? And I told him, we will definitely talk about that once we're sure the Twins are going to make the postseason. That was my response because I'm like, I am just losing a little bit of hope here. But so here's my question, Dan. The Twins have played 2 out of 3 against the Orioles. They've each won a game. And it's coming down to the last game of the season. And the Twins control their own fate. And if they lose, they go to Houston and play the Astros, the 3 seed at this point. If they win, they go to New York and play the Yankees as the 4 seed. Do they lose that game on purpose?
What's the thing about, 2 bad choices that you don't want to make either way? You know what? I think that Rocco will put out a lineup that's going to tell us that, right? So if he puts out a lineup of, Kersey and Hellman and all of these, and no Royce Lewis, I think we'll have our answer there, what he's intending. But part of me says, let's go to New York, right? Let's just see. Last year, they exercised the demons of the playoff drought. Why not go to New York and exercise another?
Is it excise or
exorcise, like the exorcism. That's what I'm going with anyway.
I think it's excise.
Well, I think you can do both. I think you can excise something and you can also exorcise. It's a demon. I was talking about a demon, so it would be exorcising.
Well, I understand.
That.
Yes, I understand. Yes, the language is perfectly clear, Dan. I understand. I'm just making sure we're using the right word. So you say try and win that game and go to New York.
Yes, I do in that situation. Yes.
I don't know, Dan. Like, to be fair,
you play
it's
to
not
win
a good
the game.
option.
Just
like
play to win the game, Rocco. Don't play to win the next one. Play to win that game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Now, if it was different and the Royals were the 3 seed, and then you have the choice to play the Royals or the Yankees, I'm going to lose that game, Dan. I'm not even putting a lineup card out there. I'm going to say, you know what? We have some guys who just hang out in the clubhouse. They do the laundry and they mop up. Let's throw them out there and just see what happens. But no, if your choices are the Yankees or the Astros, I would say, yep, like you said, play to win the game, go into the postseason on a winning streak if you can.
All right, let's go on here and grade this one.
Series grades.
I was trying to math yours out, Dan, to figure out what you gave them as a grade, but I'm going to give them a D. I think you really needed 3 of 4 here. It would have made the standings look just a touch better. The lack of offensive production is inexcusable in Game 2, especially 0 for 5 with runners in scoring position. That was sort of the theme throughout this series, Dan, is the Twins being unable to get guys home. I think that a D is probably more than they deserve here for a series split against a team that's not really competing for a postseason spot, Dan. I think they needed to do better.
Yeah, I gave them a 6 out of 10 in the advanced retreat. They just kind of treaded water at best. And then as far as well-played baseball, I did go with a 6 out of 10 because the pitching overall was actually pretty good. I thought it was the defense was bad. The clutch hitting was not great. But at the same time, there was the key home run by Larnach. There was the key home run by Julien. Like, it wasn't a series totally bereft of good plays, but that averages out to a 6 out of 10. A 6 out of 10 is a D-.
Would you say that all of the pitchers pitched well, Dan?
I would say that nearly all of the pitchers pitched well, and I will not tell you which ones I didn't think pitched well, David.
All right, well, lots to talk about here in Herbie's headlines.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
Okay, just a couple of quick hits here real fast. Kyle Schwarber ties the MLB record for leadoff home runs in the season with 13. I think there's a good chance he probably surpasses that in the remaining games. Secondly, the fastest strikeout in MLB history was recorded by Ben Joystan, 105.5 miles per hour, which Duran throws really fast. He throws 101. He can hit 102. How do you even what's the difference to a batter from 102 to 105.5?
That's like F1 car fast, isn't it, David?
Well, F1 cars are about double that. But yeah, I suppose relative to the distance that the ball is traveling, I'm sure there's some comparison that a physicist could work out.
There you go.
This note I just put in because it's fun when the Yankees lose. But Wyatt Langford hits a walk-off grand slam for the Rangers against the Yankees, which I watched that replay probably more times than I should have, Dan. I think that the closer we get to the postseason and the more and more likely it looks like the Twins are going to play the Yankees, the more my hatred for the Yankees is sort of stirred within me. And we haven't seen the Yankees for a while, right? I was at that game at Target Field. It was very sad. But I just think, Dan, that we have to remember how much we don't like them.
Yeah, it's good to be reminded, especially when I like Aaron Judge so much.
All rise for Dan's Judge love.
He's hit a lot of home runs this year. And then the White Sox, on a ball hit down the left field line, 3 guys kind of converge for it. And of course, nobody catches it. Don't you feel bad for them at all? Is there nothing in your heart that says, oh, those poor White Sox?
It was a Three Stooges routine in left field. And the White Sox was said by the announcer, which feels like a very modern thing to say. It feels harsh and also hilarious that on mainstream broadcast, guys are saying the White Sox.
That's, yeah. It's like Caleb Thielbar, right? We just did that last week.
Yes, very much so. And then the last note just for you, Dan.
Oh, man.
The Cubs,
this
a monumental feat that will go down in history. I'm sure they've already got the gloves and the balls used in the Hall of Fame for the Cubs. They throw a no-hitter, Dan. Not just a no-hitter, mind you. A 3-pitcher combined no-hitter, which some would argue, Dan, is more impressive.
Would they argue that? I don't think that they would argue that. Oh, man.
Why are we even talking about that anymore?
No, it's not worth talking about at all. when you can't attach it to one player and use the word perfect game, it doesn't matter.
I would argue it matters a little bit, but yes, I do agree that this whole and the Cubs throw a 7-pitcher combined no-hitter, it's a little bit over the top.
Are we in the Florida training league? What are we talking about here?
Okay, with that here, Dan, let's go on to our Puckett's picks for the upcoming Royals series.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Puckett's Picks.
Well, so the listeners are going to stick with Lewis. I don't know that you can blame him. This is a hard one to pick, Dan. Hogs is next. He takes Wallner, and then it'll be you, Dan Thompson.
I don't love the choices, but I think I'm gonna go back to my guy Jose Miranda.
I am not throwing away my shot.
Yeah, I think that's a valid pick. I got to go with Santana. I mean, I know he's kind of streaky, but at this point, Dan, he's the guy who's swinging the bat and getting that ball over the fence, and 5 points with one swing of the bat is something that I can live with.
Well, it's a big series here against the Royals. Again, the Twins won't have Buxton. They won't have Kepler, but hey, they'll have Hellman and Kersey Jr., right? I mean, pretty much, the same.
Okay, well, with that, Dan, I think we got to get out of here. But like you said, big series up against the Royals. Hopefully, Dan, on Sunday we're talking about a series sweep.
Well, folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on X at Min for the Win and find our Min for the Win Facebook and Instagram pages. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on your favorite platform so you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or a like, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. The link is in the description. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Twins. That'll wrap up another episode of Min for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kuvas and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.